2 summers ago, my family and I visited Williamsburg, Virginia on vacation, and we visited Colonial Williamsburg, which if you've been there, you know that is a Revolutionary wartime village, and that people actually work and live there in character. So it's an amazing place, and we actually struck up this conversation with an African American man who had worked there for many years, and he had worked there as a carpenter, and he was using this sort of old world technology to continue to build homes and buildings on site there. And we chatted for a good couple hours, and we got on the topic of civil rights and racism. And he told us that within the last couple of years, he has seen this incredible increase in racist language and racist behavior directed at him as he works. And he said as visitors and tourists come through, almost not a day goes by that someone doesn't call him the N-word to his face as he's working. And he also mentioned that it always wasn't that way. This was something new, and it was this increase in racist behavior. And Megan and I were just shocked to hear that. We were shocked to learn that this sort of behavior was so prevalent and so prominent, especially to that degree. And that really, according to him, it was increasing. Well, fast forward a couple years, and it sure doesn't seem to be improving very much. And things have obviously reached a fever pitch lately with these murders of Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd. And what we've seen on film is just horrific. It's horrific human behavior. You almost can't even believe your eyes as you're watching it. But it is a sad, sad reality for the African American community. So the question is, how are we going to respond? How do we as believers, as these carriers of the good news of Jesus, respond to what's happening? And I think there's many ways, but I'm going to start with these three. I've decided to start with these three, and maybe you will join me. Here's the first one. I'm going to call it out when I see it. I'm going to call it out as sin, as evil, as wicked. The reality is nobody should be treated differently because of their skin tone, ever. Every single one of us is an image bearer, right? We're an image bearer of God and should be treated as such with dignity and with respect. And you've seen folks calling it out on social media. You've seen folks calling it out in protest. You have seen folks calling it out, even in personal conversations. But the point is to call it out and not to stay silent. The second thing I'm going to do, as Scripture says, is lament with those who lament. The African American community is by and large hurting and scared and traumatized. And so this is a time to hurt with those who hurt. Number 3, I'm going to pray. I am going to pray for justice for those who've been wronged, those who've been hurt, the families of those who've been killed. I'm going to pray that God doesn't let this kind of injustice go on, this kind of hatred go on. And maybe you've thought along with the psalmist, how long, O Lord? How long will this sort of thing continue? How could it be that this is still happening? Well, the book of Habakkuk actually starts very much the same way. And it starts with this prayer of protest, or this prayer of complaint, this sort of, how long, O Lord, to God. And what the prophet didn't know is that God was already at work. As he was praying, God was already at work, answering his prayers, even in ways that he would never believe. And that's our great assurance, right? That God does hear our prayer and is at work in ways that we just cannot see yet. And with that, I'm going to finish with reading this portion of Habakkuk, this sort of complaint to God, but reminding myself that he is indeed working and that he's answering. Here's Habakkuk 1, verses 2 through 4. How long, O Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen? Violence is everywhere, I cry, but you do not come to save. Must I forever see these evil deeds? Must I watch while all this misery? Wherever I look, I see destruction and violence. I'm surrounded by evil people who love to argue and fight. The law has become paralyzed, and there's no justice in the courts. The wicked far outnumber the righteous, so that justice has become perverted. Maybe you'll join me in praying, how long, O Lord?